Have you ever felt the crushing weight of an empty space beside you? The lingering ghost of someone who consciously chose to walk away? What if their departure wasn't a lifelong curse, but a profound awakening? Today, we explore 10 Stoic lessons to stop missing someone who left. The rain drummed a relentless, rhythmic beat against the window pane of Elias's apartment, mimicking the exhausting tempo of his own racing heart. It had been exactly 72 days since she left. 72 days since the door clicked shut, finalizing a decision he had no part in making. In the center of his kitchen table sat a single blue ceramic coffee mug. It was hers. A mundane object. Yet to Elias, it was a heavy anchor keeping his mind tethered to the bottom of a dark ocean of memories. He spent his evenings staring at it, replaying the final conversation in his mind, searching for the invisible turning point. What if I had said something differently? What if I had been more attentive? What if I could just convince her to come back? Elias was a man trapped in the labyrinth of the past, bleeding his energy into a timeline that no longer existed. His apartment, once a sanctuary of shared laughter and quiet Sunday mornings, had transformed into a museum of ghosts. One evening, unable to bear the suffocating silence, Elias walked through the rain-soaked streets of his city, eventually finding himself standing before the warmly lit window of an antique horology shop. The sign above read, "Lucien's Timepieces." Lucien, the owner, was an elderly man with hands as steady as the gears he mended and a mind as sharp as a diamond drill. He was a friend of Elias's late grandfather and a man who seemed to carry a profound, unshakable peace. The bell above the door chimed as Elias entered. The shop smelled of aged wood, brass polish, and old paper. The walls were lined with clocks of every era, all ticking in a chaotic yet strangely comforting symphony. Lucien looked up from his workbench, pushing a jeweler's loop up his forehead. He took one look at Elias's hollow eyes and soaking wet coat, and knew instantly. "The storm outside is fierce," Lucien said gently, pouring a cup of hot tea from a thermos. "But it seems the storm inside you is much worse. Sit down, my boy." Over tea, Elias poured his heart out. He spoke of the betrayal, the abandonment, and the agonizing ache of missing someone who had simply decided they no longer wanted to be there. "I can't accept it, Lucien," Elias whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't control this pain. I want to fix it. But she won't let me." Lucien listened in silence until Elias had emptied himself of words. Then the old watchmaker reached into a drawer and pulled out a beautifully intricate golden pocket watch. The glass face was completely shattered. "Elias," Lucien began, his voice resonant and calm. "You are breaking your own heart by trying to govern a kingdom that does not belong to you." Lesson 1. The dichotomy of control. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus, Lucien explained, turning the broken watch in his hands, taught us the most fundamental rule of a tranquil life. Some things are within our power, while others are not. You are agonizing over a decision that was made in another person's mind. You are trying to control the legs of another human being, willing them to walk back to you. Elias frowned. "But we were a team. I had a say in our life." "You had a say in your actions," Lucien corrected gently, his voice calm but unwavering. "Your choices were always yours to make. You control your values, your words, your integrity, and the way you respond to the world. Those things belong to you alone. But you cannot control another person's affections, desires, decisions, or presence. She has her own agency, Elias. She is not an extension of your will." Elias lowered his head, But Lucien continued before he could interrupt. By wishing you could force her to love you or undo a choice she freely made, you are arguing with reality itself. Reality doesn't negotiate. It doesn't bend because we suffer. And when you argue with reality, you lose every single time. The only battle you can ever hope to win is the one within your own character. Elias looked at the shattered glass of the watch. So I just accept that I am helpless? No, Lucien smiled warmly. You realize where your true power lies. Let go of the illusion that you could have forced her to stay. Her departure is in the realm of the external, your reactions to it, your dignity, your healing, your choice to stand back up, is entirely within your control. Reclaim your jurisdiction. Elias felt a tiny, almost imperceptible knot loosen in his chest. For 2 months, he had been trying to move a mountain by pushing against it with his bare hands. Lesson 2. Amor fati. Love your fate. Lucien set the broken watch on the table. You look at this shattered glass as a tragedy. You look at her leaving as a curse that has ruined your life. But the Stoics didn't just tolerate bad things happening, they embraced them. They practiced amor fati, a love of one's fate. How can I love the fact that the person I love walked away? Elias asked, defensive. Because what has happened is necessary, Lucien replied. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. Right now, you are acting like a small candle, easily blown out by the wind of her departure. You must become a bonfire. Lucien leaned forward. If she walked away, it means she was not meant to stay. Why would you want to chain your life to someone who does not see your worth? Her leaving is not a tragedy. It is a brutal, necessary clearing of the path. It is the universe making room for the life you are actually meant to live, the resilience you are meant to build. Love this pain, Elias. Love this abandonment. It is the very material you will use to forge a stronger, wiser version of yourself. Elias walked home that night, the rain still falling, but for the first time, he didn't feel cold. He walked into his kitchen, picked up the blue ceramic mug, and instead of leaving it as a monument to his grief, he washed it, dried it, and put it away in a dark cupboard. It was a small action, but it was his own. It was in his control. Days turned into weeks. The initial, blinding agony of the breakup had dulled into a persistent, hollow ache. Elias had begun reading the texts Lucien recommended, Epictetus's Enchiridion and Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Yet, the nights remained treacherous. In the quiet hours, his mind would play a highlight reel of the relationship. He remembered the trips to the coast, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the warmth of her hand in his. He missed her with a ferocity that made it hard to breathe. He returned to the watch shop on a crisp Tuesday afternoon. The shop was empty of customers, filled only with the steady, synchronized ticking of 100 clocks. Lucien was polishing the brass pendulum of a grandfather clock. I understand I can't control her, Elias confessed, sitting heavily on a wooden stool. And I'm trying to see the value in this pain, but I can't stop missing what I lost. I feel like I've been robbed of my future. Lucien stopped his polishing and looked at Elias with deep empathy. The vocabulary we use to describe our grief dictates the depth of our suffering, Elias. You say you have lost her. But tell me, did you ever own her? Lesson 3. The illusion of permanence and the borrowed cup. Caleb walked heavy-footed to a wooden cabinet in the corner of the shop. the loose floorboards groaning under his weight. He unlocked a glass-paneled door and retrieved a small, delicate porcelain teacup, its surface painted with faded, intricate cobalt vines. He crossed the room, pulling a rag from his pocket to wipe dust from the rim, and placed the cup directly into Elias's hands. "Hold this carefully," Caleb instructed, his voice low over the synchronized ticking of the room. "Feel the weight of it. It was fired in a kiln over 200 years ago." Elias gripped the cup. The porcelain was smooth and cold against his calloused skin. The rim felt impossibly thin, vibrating slightly in his hand, feeling as though it might shatter if he simply exhaled too sharply. "Now," Caleb said, leaning against the scratched glass counter and crossing his thick arms, "Assume I let you take that cup home to your apartment. You drink your morning coffee from it. You wash it carefully every single night with warm water. You admire the painted cobalt vines under your kitchen light. It becomes a reliable, comforting staple of your daily routine. But one Tuesday afternoon, I knock on your door, hold out my open hand, and say, 'Elias, I require my cup back.' Would you collapse on the floor, weeping, claiming to the world that you had been brutally robbed?" "No," Elias answered slowly, running his thumb over a tiny, unglazed chip in the base. "I would hand it back to you. It was always yours. I was merely borrowing it." "Exactly," Caleb nodded, the harsh, incandescent overhead light catching the deep, weathered wrinkles around his eyes. The philosopher Epictetus taught his students a rigid discipline of language. He commanded them never to say about anything, "I have lost it," but rather, "I have returned it." Is your partner dead? She has been returned. Is your property seized? It has been returned. Caleb tapped the glass counter with a heavy knuckle, the sound sharp in the quiet shop. We suffer, Elias, because we grip things that do not belong to us and arrogantly claim ownership over human souls. You treated her physical presence like a fixed asset in your life, but nature, fate, the universe, whatever heavy mechanism you believe winds the gears of this world, only grants us people, relationships, and experiences on loan. None of it is our permanent property. When she walked out of your door and closed it behind her, nature was simply recalling its loan. Be intensely, fiercely grateful for the time you were permitted to borrow her companionship, but do not mourn as if a piece of your own physical flesh was violently stolen. You were a complete, breathing organism before she arrived, and you remain a complete, breathing organism right now. Lesson 4. Objective Representation. Stripping the Legend. Elias sighed, rubbing his temples. Even if I accept that, the memories still haunt me. I keep remembering how perfect it was. Lucian chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. Was it perfect, Elias? Or is your loneliness acting as a romantic film director, editing out all the bad scenes? Lucian pulled a thick, leather-bound ledger from his desk. In Stoicism, there is a practice of breaking things down into their most objective, unglamorous parts. Marcus Aurelius used to remind himself that vintage wine is just fermented grape juice, and purple robes are just sheep's wool dyed with shellfish blood. He stripped things of the legends we project onto them. Lucian tapped his temple. Your mind is currently projecting a legend onto your past relationship. You are remembering her as a flawless goddess, and your relationship as an unblemished utopia. But I am an old man with good ears, Elias. I remember you coming into my shop a year ago, stressed, exhausted, complaining about how you felt unheard. I remember the arguments you mentioned. Elias felt a flush of embarrassment. Lucian was right. You must practice objective representation, Lucien instructed. When a memory of her laughing on the beach pops into your head and brings a wave of sorrow, counter it with logic. Say to yourself, yes, we had a good day at the beach. But she is also a human being who was chronically emotionally unavailable. We are two mammals who shared a temporary bond that ultimately fractured because of incompatible values. That sounds incredibly unromantic, Elias noted. It is exactly as romantic as it needs to be to save your sanity, Lucien countered. You are missing a phantom. You are missing an idealized version of her that does not exist in reality. The real person, the flawed, complex person who ultimately looked at you and decided she did not want to stay, is not the angel you are mourning. Stop viewing the past through a stained glass window. Look through clear glass. That night, when the highlight reel began to play in his head, Elias grabbed a notebook. He drew a line down the middle. On one side, he wrote the romanticized memory. On the other, he forced himself to write the objective truth, including the arguments, the fundamental disagreements, and the stark reality of her departure. The fog began to lift. As the months turned, winter gave way to the early thaws of spring. Elias's apartment felt less like a tomb and more like a blank canvas. Yet the modern world is designed to make letting go remarkably difficult. One evening, in a moment of weakness, Elias opened his social media. He typed her name into the search bar. Within seconds, his screen was flooded with images of her, smiling at a coffee shop, standing next to people he didn't know, living a life entirely separate from him. A sharp spike of adrenaline and sorrow shot through his chest. He felt as though he were right back at day one. The next morning, pale and exhausted, he sat in Lucian's shop amidst the ticking clocks. I relapsed, Elias admitted quietly, staring at the floorboards. I checked up on her, and now my mind is in chaos. I keep wondering who she's with, what she's doing, if she's thinking of me. Lesson 5. Guarding the inner citadel. Lucian didn't look angry. He looked sympathetic. He walked to the front door of his shop, which had a heavy iron deadbolt, and locked it with a loud clack. Elias, if a stranger walked up to this shop, kicked the door open, and started smashing my antique clocks with a hammer, what would you expect me to do? I'd expect you to fight him, call the police, and throw him out, Elias said. Naturally, Lucian replied. Now what if I was the one who unlocked the door, invited the vandal inside, handed him the hammer, and politely watched as he destroyed my life's work? Elias went quiet, understanding dawning on him. The Stoics believed the mind is our inner citadel, Lucian explained. It is a fortress designed to keep our peace, our reason, and our joy safe from the chaos of the external world. Marcus Aurelius warned us that while we would be outraged if someone abused our physical body, we willingly hand over our minds to anyone who wishes to distress us. Lucien pointed at Elias's phone resting on the counter. Every time you search for her, every time you actively seek out updates on a life you are no longer a part of, you are unlocking the gates of your citadel. You are handing the hammer to a ghost and letting it smash your peace of mind. It's just so hard not to look, Elias confessed. It's a habit. Discipline is the highest form of self-love, Lucien stated firmly. You must guard the gates of your mind. Block the profiles. Delete the old messages. This is not out of malice or petty revenge toward her. It is out of a fierce, protective love for yourself. You cannot heal a burn wound if you insist on resting your hand on the hot stove every night. Defend your citadel. Elias picked up his phone right then and there. With trembling thumbs, he unfollowed, blocked, and deleted the digital tethers that bound him to the past. It felt terrifying, like cutting the rope to a hot air balloon. But as the balloon floated away, He realized he was still standing on solid ground. Lesson 6. Memento mori. Remember you must die. Good, Lucian said, his eyes twinkling with approval. Now, I want to show you one last thing for today. Lucian walked to a small glass display case at the back of the shop. Inside was a simple, stark hourglass, filled with black sand. The sand was trickling down steadily, grain by grain. Do you know how many days the average human lives, Elias? Lucian asked. I'm not sure. Maybe 25,000. Roughly 29,000, Lucian confirmed. And how many of those precious, irreplaceable days have you spent grieving a woman who is currently spending her days happily without you? The question hit Elias like a physical blow in the chest. Over 100, Elias whispered. Lucian turned the hourglass over, watching the black sand fall. Memento mori, Lucian said softly. Remember that you will die. It sounds morbid, but to the Stoics, it was the ultimate clarion call to life. Seneca wrote that we act like mortals in all that we fear, and immortals in all that we desire. You are acting as though you have an infinite amount of time, Elias. You are squandering your fleeting, beautiful existence, lingering in a graveyard of what used to be. Lucian placed a firm hand on Elias's shoulder. Time is the only non-renewable resource you have. Every hour you spend missing someone who walked away is an hour stolen from the life you could be building. It is an hour stolen from the friends who are here, from the passions you have neglected, from the future partner who will actually choose to stay. Elias stared at the black sand falling. Each grain felt like a heartbeat. He realized that while he was waiting for the past to change, the present was slipping through his fingers, never to return. You must stop missing her, not just because it hurts, Lucian said, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper, but because you simply do not have the time to waste. Sunlight cut through the rusted metal slats of Elias's fire escape, throwing harsh, geometric shadows across his bedroom floor. It was a late Tuesday morning. Dust motes drifted lazily in the stale air. Elias sat on the edge of the mattress, running a calloused thumb over the rough denim of his jeans. For the first time in nearly 80 days, his first waking thought was not of her. The realization hit him with a strange, quiet weight. The crushing pressure in his chest had receded to a dull, manageable ache, like a bruised rib that only flared up when he breathed too deeply. He laced up his boots, the stiff leather creaking in the silent apartment. He walked out into the city. The air smelled of damp asphalt, roasted peanuts from a street vendor, and the acrid sting of diesel exhaust. The world was loud, gritty, and relentlessly moving forward. He found his way back to the horology shop. The bell above the door chimed, cutting through the heavy scent of brass polish and chemical solvent. The old watchmaker, Caleb, sat hunched over his workbench, a magnifying loupe wedged into his eye socket. He was meticulously scrubbing a rusted, oxidized gear from a maritime chronometer. I didn't think of her this morning, Elias said, leaning against the wooden counter. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Steadier, heavier. Caleb paused, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. Progress, the old man grunted. But you are here, which means the silence in your apartment is still too loud for you to bear alone. What is the new grievance today, Elias? Elias dragged a hand over his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw. It's the emptiness. Even if I accept that I can't control her leaving, and even if I stop looking at old photos, there is a massive void where my future used to be. Every plan we made, every trip we booked, the house we talked about buying, it's all gone. I feel like I'm staring down a dead-end street. The roadblock is too massive. Caleb turned his attention back to the heavily rusted gear on his desk. He picked up a stiff wire brush and began to scrape at the oxidation. The sound was harsh, a grating metallic screech that made Elias flinch. "You look at a roadblock and you see a dead end," Caleb said, his voice easily carrying over the scraping noise. "But you are forgetting the core discipline of the Stoics." Lesson 7. The obstacle is the way. Caleb blew the rust dust off the brass gear. It gleamed faintly under the harsh incandescent bulb. Aurelius, the great Roman emperor, wrote that the mind converts and changes every hindrance to its activity into an aid. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Caleb set the gear down and looked Elias dead in the eye. "You are viewing her departure as an obstacle that has derailed your life. You think it ruined the path." "Elias, this pain is the path now. The friction you feel, the agonizing loneliness, the forced independence. This is the abrasive wire brush clearing the rust off your own character." Elias stared at the scratched brass on the table. "You're saying I should use this?" "I am saying you have no other logical choice," Caleb replied dryly. "When you lift heavy weights at the gym, you are intentionally placing an obstacle in front of your muscles. The muscle tears, and in repairing itself it grows denser, stronger. Psychological endurance works the exact same way. If she had stayed, perhaps you would have remained comfortable, complacent, dependent on her for your emotional stability. Her leaving has forced you into the wilderness. Use the cold nights to learn how to build your own fire. Stop wishing for the obstacle to be removed and start climbing over it." Elias swallowed hard. The sour metallic taste of lingering anxiety in his mouth began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard sense of resolve. He didn't have to like the roadblock. He just had to use it. "There is something else," Elias muttered, staring out the rain-streaked window of the shop. Across the street, a crowded diner bustled with people. Couples sat in booths, laughing over steaming mugs of coffee. It's the isolation. When you lose the one person who knew every detail of your life, the exact way you take your coffee, the scar on your left knee, your irrational fear of deep water, you feel completely severed from the rest of humanity. I feel like an amputee, entirely disconnected. Caleb walked out from behind the counter, gesturing for Elias to follow him. He led the younger man to the back of the shop, where a massive, floor-to-ceiling grandfather clock stood with its wooden panels removed, exposing hundreds of interlocking brass and steel wheels, heavy lead weights, and a slowly swinging pendulum. Lesson 8. Sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all things. "Look at this escapement mechanism," Caleb instructed, pointing a weathered finger at a specific cluster of moving parts. "If I remove one small auxiliary wheel, does the entire clock cease to be a clock? Does the energy of the mainspring disappear?" "No," Elias said. "The mechanism adapts, or you replace the part. The clock still stands. The ancient philosophers," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a reverent murmur, "believed in a concept called sympatheia. It is the understanding that the universe is a single, living organism, and every human being is an interconnected part of a larger whole. We are all limbs of the same body. We share the same oxygen, the same soil, the same inevitable mortality." Caleb turned to Elias. "You feel isolated because you hyper-focused your entire capacity for connection onto one single human being. You placed the entire weight of your social and emotional existence onto her shoulders. When she stepped away, you fell. But you are not severed from humanity Elias. You are standing in a city of millions of people who have felt the exact same heartbreak you are feeling right now. Caleb pointed toward the bustling diner across the street. You are connected to the man pouring the coffee, the woman waiting for the bus, the stranger who held the door for you this morning. You belong to the human collective. Do not insult the vast, intricate network of human existence by claiming you are alone just because one specific gear chose to spin in a different direction. Reconnect with the whole. Elias stood in silence for a long time, watching the heavy brass pendulum swing back and forth. Tock, tick, tock. The steady, indifferent rhythm of time moving forward. He didn't feel cured, but he felt grounded. The suffocating walls of his isolation had cracked, letting in a draft of cold, sobering reality. Late June brought a suffocating heat to the city. The air hung thick and heavy, smelling of baked concrete and ozone from approaching afternoon thunderstorms. Elias was sweating through his grey t-shirt as he hauled boxes out of his closet. He was moving to a new apartment, a smaller, brighter place on the east side of the river. A fresh physical environment to match the mental architecture he had been slowly, painstakingly rebuilding. He pulled a heavy cardboard box from the top shelf. As he set it on the floor, the bottom flaps gave way, spilling old receipts, tangled charging cables, and forgotten paperwork onto the scuffed hardwood. And there, gleaming amidst the mundane clutter, was a silver hairpin. It was ornate, shaped like a crescent moon. She had worn it the night of their anniversary dinner. Elias froze. His breath hitched in his throat, his chest tightened, a physiological response hardwired into his nervous system. But this time, the reaction didn't consume him. He didn't collapse into a spiral of agonizing what-ifs. He simply reached down, picked up the cold silver metal, and felt its sharp edges against his thumb. He put it in his pocket, finished packing, and drove across town to the horology shop. The bell chimed. Caleb was sitting in his usual spot, the smell of pipe tobacco mingling with the scent of aged wood. Elias walked up to the counter and placed the silver hairpin on the glass display case. It made a sharp, final clink. "I found this today," Elias said, his voice steady, devoid of the frantic desperation that had marked his early visits. "A few months ago, finding this would have ruined my week. I would have used it as proof that I wasn't enough for her. I would have stared at it and wondered why my love wasn't valuable enough to make her stay." Caleb picked up the hairpin, examining it with a jeweler's detached precision. "And today? Today, it's just a piece of metal," Elias said. "But the lingering thought, the shadow of rejection. How does a Stoic deal with the inherent feeling of not being good enough when someone walks away?" Lesson 9. Eudaimonia, virtue as the only true good. Caleb opened a drawer and pulled out 2 heavy coins. He placed them on the glass next to the hairpin. One was a gleaming, polished brass token. The other was a dull, scratched, dirt-covered gold sovereign. "If I take this gold sovereign," Caleb said, pointing to the dirty coin, "and I throw it in the mud, spit on it, and declare to the world that it is entirely worthless, does its molecular composition change? Does it stop being gold?" "No," Elias answered. "If I take this cheap brass token, polish it until it blinds you, and put it in a velvet box, does it become gold?" "No, it's still brass. Your worth, Elias, is the gold sovereign," Caleb said, his voice thick with gravel and authority. The Stoics pursued eudaimonia, a state of true human flourishing and deep well-being. They believed that eudaimonia is achieved entirely through your own virtue, your courage, your justice, your wisdom, and your temperance. Your worth is intrinsic. It is generated internally by your character. Caleb pushed the silver hairpin back toward Elias. When she chose to walk away, she made a judgment based on her own preferences, her own flaws, her own trajectory. Her inability to recognize your value or her choice to seek something different does not decrease your value by a single fraction. She cannot take your worth away, Elias, because she did not give it to you in the first place. You are not a stock market commodity whose price fluctuates based on external demand. Stop handing the appraisal of your soul to someone who has already left the building. Elias felt a profound physical release in his shoulders. The lingering, toxic shame of rejection, the quiet voice whispering that he was defective, evaporated into the humid summer air. He was a flawed man, yes, but he was a man building his own solid foundation. I understand, Elias said quietly, picking up the hairpin. He walked over to the small trash bin in the corner of the shop and dropped it in. It was a simple motion, free of anger, free of malice. Just a discarding of something he no longer needed to carry. There is one final lesson, Caleb said, walking around the counter. He moved slowly, his joints stiff with age, but his eyes were bright, fierce, and entirely present. I have rebuilt myself, Caleb, Elias said. I'm sleeping again. I'm working. I don't check her social media. I've secured the gates. What else is there? Preparation, Caleb said softly. You have survived this storm. But you will love again, Elias. You are human. You will meet someone else. You will open your inner citadel to them, and you will intertwine your life with theirs. And when you do, you must not do it with the blind, naive expectation of permanence that caused you to suffer so deeply this time. Lesson 10. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Caleb gestured to the hundreds of clocks ticking on the walls. Everything in this will eventually stop ticking. I will die. You will die. Every relationship you ever forge will end, either by distance, by choice, or by the grave. This is the absolute law of nature. Elias frowned. That's a grim way to look at a new relationship. To assume it will end? It is not grim. It is liberating, Caleb insisted. Seneca practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. He advised us to regularly visualize the loss of the things we love. Why? Because when you truly accept that a thing is temporary, you stop taking it for granted. If you know a relationship could end tomorrow, you will not waste today arguing over trivial nonsense. You will not withhold your affection. You will love them fiercely, entirely, and without reservation, precisely because you know the clock is ticking. Caleb placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. You suffered because you expected reality to bend to your desires. You expected permanence in a world governed by change. Next time, walk into love with your eyes wide open. Accept the risk, embrace the vulnerability, but know in your bones that no matter what happens, no matter who leaves, who stays, or what tragedies befall you, your character, your virtue, and your mind are yours alone. Elias nodded slowly. The heavy, oppressive heat of the summer day seemed to break, a cool draught filtering through the cracked window of the shop. He looked at Caleb, truly seeing the old man, the deep lines of experience carved into his face, the quiet dignity of a life lived deliberately. Thank you, Elias said. The words felt insufficient, but they were true. Do not thank me, Caleb replied, turning back to his workbench. I just clean the gears. You are the one who has to wind the clock. Now go. You are taking up valuable space in my shop." Elias smiled. He walked out of the shop, the chime of the bell ringing clearly behind him. He stepped onto the crowded sidewalk, blending into the flow of strangers, businessmen, and tourists. The roar of the city rushed over him, the blare of taxi horns, the hiss of air brakes, the chaotic, beautiful friction of life happening all around him. He didn't know where he was going next. He didn't know what the future held. But as he walked down the avenue, his boots striking the concrete with a steady, rhythmic purpose, Elias realized the most important truth of all. He was finally moving forward, and he was entirely, unequivocally, whole. Healing is not a final destination. It is the daily, gritty practice of reclaiming your own mind. By applying these Stoic lessons, you stop waiting for someone who walked away and start walking toward your own unshakable strength. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who desperately needs to hear it today, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into philosophy and growth. Your support helps us build stronger minds together.